Tolga, welcome to our podcast, Supply Chain Wizard for Pharma podcast. So for our audiences, I'm very excited to host you as an expert in supply chain, S&OP, IBP processes in pharma. Tolga is joining us from a large set of experiences in pharma and consumer goods industries, working companies like Novartis, L'Oreal, and now Merck Group. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me today.
So I'm very excited, especially for today's topic, because if I go back to like 15 plus years ago, my first job in pharma was S&OP, sales and operations planning, and IBP, integrated business planning. And this is one of the longest running, let's say, challenges, I would say, in the industry, whether you're in pharma or consumer, like still nobody has fully got it, right? Like it's always a continuous improvement. It's always a challenge. But I know you have been spending a good portion of your career on this. But before I jump into the topic, why don't you take a few minutes and introduce yourself and your background for our audience?
Perfect. Of course, happy to do so. Let me maybe start from the earlier times of my career, because I started as a production engineer in one of the production sites of Novartis in Istanbul. And actually, this was probably one of the best decisions that I have ever made. I would really recommend if for any of our supply chainers, if they have the chance to really see what's happening in the shop floor. Because for us planners, it is relatively easy to change the production plans by switching one of the bucks and then kind of move one production to another day. But actually, what is really happening on the production on the shop floor is quite important. So in this regard, I was lucky to have this experience, as I also have the background of being a chemical engineer. This was the first step of my career, and then I moved into supply chain world. And I still kind of like am exploring and developing myself, I would say. I took a couple of roles as supply planner, demand planner, API planning, line scheduling, all those sort of like planning activities. Then I also took some additional responsibilities as I work for the region, especially when I joined a Merck Group back in 2016. I had some responsibilities as the regional supply chain manager. And then as of 2018, I moved to headquarters here in Germany, in Darmstadt. And since then, I am heading the IBP team, which basically is ensuring the governance of the IBP process across the company. But I'm sure we'll get to a bit of more details on the go.
Yeah. No, that's great. It sounds like a great advancement from the lowest level in the shop floor, understanding how the product is made, which is obviously a special case in pharmaceuticals, right? We are not just making widgets in this industry. We're making life-saving drugs, and people depend their life on these drugs in some cases, and their well-being. So it's very important task. And going up the ranks in planning, scheduling, and then like leading the IBP, I think you can be a great resource for the overall pharma industry to talk about like what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. But before I get to that, like I always start by asking our guests like how they view the world of pharma like as an industry, because you've been to multiple other industries, but how would you in your own words summarize like your like view of the pharma industry?
Well, that's a very good question. And actually, I always feel privileged to be working in the pharmaceutical industry, because, I mean, we are every day serving our patients. And always, and supply chainers never get bored, right? There's always a challenge. There's either a firefighting activity or to be able to meet with the company's kind of strategic plans. So all the time we are dealing with those sort of challenges, and especially in the pharma world, knowing that at the end of the day, this will be a help for our patients, who to the people who really are waiting for this product, always gives the motivation to take the extra mile. So in this regard, I'm super happy to be working in pharmaceutical industry. Nevertheless, as I also had spent a couple of years in L'Oreal in the FMCG sector, this also gave me a very good kind of visibility on what could look slightly different in some other industries, because I mean, pharma is known to be rather rigid, if that would be the right word to call, in many dimensions. So this is good, I think, to a certain extent. But on the other hand, this also leads to a lot of opportunities, a lot of development actions for many companies. So therefore, to kind of like answer your question, I mean, being in the supply chain industry in pharmaceuticals really requires some kind of like decent performance, kind of delivering the best every day, because you have little chance to make mistakes. Nevertheless, striving always for the good is also a challenge.
Yeah. So you're saying pharma is a little bit more challenging than other industries that you've been.
Well, I could say so. I mean, in majority of the cases, like I said, you really need to deliver the best. You cannot really kind of do 95% of what is expected. You really need to give the 100%. So in this regard, it's challenging. But like I said, on the contrary, the kind of like the feeling of really helping the patients is always helping us to go the extra mile, I think.
Yeah, excellent. No, it's great to hear that. What about if I ask you supply chain, like how do you view the world of supply? Not regardless of the pharma industry, like you're in the core of like demand and supply balancing act, right? The IBP process. How would you describe your supply chain view?
I mean, the supply chain is always suffering with some kind of like challenges. It can sometimes be rather local. Well, we are short of one of our packaging materials. I mean, I think all of the supply chainers has had this feeling in their careers, or it could be rather big. So we cannot really transport our goods because of some strategic kind of issues, or maybe some political issues happening in part of the world. So at the end of the day, there is always something that could be done better. Probably none of the supply chainers could say that like they did 100% the best plan, because probably there is a better plan which could be applied or couldn't. So therefore, I think in this kind of like fast changing pace, it is super important to really know what's happening globally, to really position our supply chain in the field accordingly. In that regard, I think the global like big companies are also struggling a lot since the COVID pandemic. I mean, I think I don't need to repeat. This was also part of some other discussions, I think. But we all learned something out of it, and then by this we are always kind of trying to improve our processes.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is pharma is a little bit more challenging as an industry. Supply chain as a functional area is also by nature challenging. There's always some firefighting. When you put the two things together, which is like the main theme of our podcast, the pharma and supply chain, that makes a heck of a job to manage, right? And put on top of it your, let's say, global scope and a large scope of a very large company. I don't need to emphasize like what kind of a difficult job you have right now in your hands. So let's dive into the S&OP and IBP as our core topic. So given these challenges, like where do you think the maturity of the industry sits when it comes to sales and operations planning or integrated business planning?
Yeah. I think it's too much fragmented in the industry. Even if we consider the kind of like big players in pharmaceutical market, when we participate, I mean, when I participate in some of the conferences with some also peers in some other pharmaceutical companies, it is really difficult to say that there is a common kind of like level of maturity across the board. You probably know the famous Gartner maturity model. And then when this one is applied to multiple companies, in general, my observation is that many of the countries are still striving to get the third level out of these 5, which is quite interesting because maybe I can give you a fun fact. The IBP itself was introduced by Oliver White in the end of 1990s, so which is like more than 25 years now, right? But still knowing that majority of the companies are having some issues to really get to the maturity that is really required, this already shows that it is not it's not a piece of cake, right? It really is a lot of effort to be able to, how to say, be at this stage where the maturity is really high. I think it really depends on the companies how they really look to the future and how strategically they position IBP in their DNAs. Most of the time, to be able to get to a decent process, we need a strong buy-in from the leadership. So I think the first thing that we need to note down is IBP is not a supply chain process. When we kind of are aligned on this very first step, then we could probably get to some improvements in there. But at the end of the day, the core is really that it needs to be cross-functional. So therefore, it's not only supply chain, but also something from controlling, something from the commercial guys, something from the market access and price. At the end of the day, to be able to build up this reliable plan, every function needs to contribute, really.
Yeah, so you're saying it's actually a lot more than supply chain. It's like the full business process end to end. So is that why it's hard? What do you think? Why do you think it's hard? Why do you think that maturity is like all over the place and not beyond like stage 3 for all these years?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that the companies need to overcome in general is to get rid of the silos, because it's quite common that our supply chain people have their, let's say, demand plans in quantities. So this one is kind of like stored in a tool, and then we know very well how many number of packs we want to sell in which month. Nevertheless, on the other hand, our controlling colleagues, our financial colleagues, might have a different understanding of how the forecasts are looking like. They might have some other plans, and then summing up the sales of a country or a business field, they might have X million euros of sales, which is being forecasted. On the other hand, there might also be some maybe general managers, some head of commercials who envision a different number when it comes to their sales teams and sales targets. If those three are basically disconnected from each other, I think there is a very big problem which really needs to be resolved very quickly. And I think IBP here is really playing a crucial role to really combine all of those plans. And I think it's rather easy to say it as such, but having an alignment out of those three core functions is actually quite a lot of work.
So what you're saying is IBP is easier said than done, and you're here trying to do it in a orchestrated way. So I know you have some material prepared for this, and I always try to get our audience to see like a crash course of the topic at hand, right? And you have a one pager I'm going to pull up right now in terms of like what is the IBP all about, what are the cornerstones of it. So let me just pull it up really quick, and I'll let you maybe take a minute or two explaining this slide to us in terms of like the cornerstones of IBP.
Sure thing. So when we get to speak about an IBP process, we really focus on those 4 elements, which we call them as cornerstones. So the first one is the bottom-up mentality. The company, of course, has some aspirations which are rather kind of like top-down driven. Nevertheless, we want to make sure that the IBP planning itself is a bottom-up approach, and it really reflects the most accurate picture from the markets. Therefore, our planning horizon for IBP is 24 months, and we would like to receive the most realistic and most unbiased projection that we can really gather from our selling affiliates. Also, another improvement in our IBP process versus the kind of like famous S&OP is that we forecast each and every product. So each and every SKU is being forecasted for every monthly bucket, not only in quantities, but also in prices. So this is also hell a lot of work, I have to say, because we most of the time do not have a stable average net selling price for our products. So it can really vary from one month to another. So to be able to have a good projection in our systems is quite important, because now linking it with the box just down below with this integrated forecast, is we do not only produce our supply planning figures from the IBP process, but we also deliver our financial planning. So basically, this multiplication of those two, quantity times average net selling price, gives us this very famous consensus forecast that in every quarter is becoming the financial commitment of our company. So when our CFO makes a LinkedIn post and says like Merck Group is going to deliver X million euros of sales this year, he or she is actually referring to this very number, which is purely driven by IBP. And here, this is the other kind of like challenge that many companies really face, is that link, that 100% link in between those quantity planning and the financial planning. So to be able to get there, I will probably jump into the box on the right top side, which is this cross-functional alignment. Like I said, supply chain has a lot of influence on building up the numbers, whereas the commercial function is also very key to be able to really project the business requirements, how the business is going to evolve from this year to next year. Or commercial or controllers or market access price people are very important to define the pricing. If there is a new competitor coming into the game next year, how this one is going to impact our average net selling prices, or if there's going to be a mandatory discount because of a governmental issue, how this is going to change our numbers. So very important to take all of those considerations from different business parties to be able to build this reliable plan.
This is where the fighting happens, right? All these parties trying to align on a single set of numbers.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, all of them really need to be accountable for one part of the plan. But then at the end of the day, when this all of those fightings or those considerations happen, the company needs to come up with kind of one plan, which is the source for everybody. And then the last but not least, of course, is the power of digital. Of course, we are segmented in terms of our data, right? Like we have the demand plans, we have the supply plans, we have the financial plans, or we have many other plans. So we cannot really, most of the time, have everything planned in the same platform. Nevertheless, we can still try to find a way to report it in a way that all of those plans are combined and then are produced in a nice reporting format. So therefore, we use our reporting solutions in a very wisely manner to really give this visibility to every stakeholder in the company. Again, not only the supply chainers have those visibility, all of the general managers, the financial guys, whenever they want to see the IBP numbers, they know where they need to go and look at. So that's also very important to be able to have this alignment across the board.
Yeah, and the technology comes into play in that bucket number 4 in the bottom right corner, right? In terms of like the complexity of number of SKUs to manage, different systems, different players, local versus global, and how everything fits together. It's hard to do these things on a spreadsheet, I assume, right?
Exactly. So here the technology is really coming into the game. So specifically for the IBP part, we are definitely trying to leverage some machine learning models to be able to forecast our numbers. So I have to say, and probably this was also discussed in one of your earlier podcasts as I listened to them, pharma industry is not the first one to jump on any sort of technological development. So we most of the time are probably we would like to really wait to see how this technology will evolve, how this probably will be applied in some FMCG or in some other industries before really absorbing them. I think this is a common fact. Nevertheless, we are still pushing and striving to make use of those digital elements, especially in the field of forecasting our numbers. So machine, and we also see that machine in majority of the cases is actually better projecting the numbers versus the judgmental ones. So therefore, we really need to count on what the technology is offering to us, and then also use them wisely.
Yeah. This is very interesting you say that, like, because like we tend to not trust the machines and the algorithms that are doing the forecasting, because we have so many demand planners, forecasters, and processes in place to do this at a more advanced level, or at least calculated level. But then you're saying that if you put the right system in place with the right algorithms, they can be better on average than the human only forecasting, which I totally relate. And it takes me back to my, consulting days with one of the big three firms. And one of my client engagements, we simply tested the hypothesis that, like, what if we just take the simple average of the last X number of months actual sales and use it as a proxy for forecast? Listen, here we are not even using, exponential smoothing or ARIMA models or things like that. We are simply taking a simple average of the last many months of sales and using that as a forecast and compare that to the actually forecasted amounts. And of course, some of them are better, some of them are worse. But on average, a simple average was better than the forecaster's forecast number, which was a total shock to everybody. This was a little afternoon exercise for us to do this testing. And to me, my mind was blown. Everybody on the team was like, okay, we really need to see where our effort is going, because clearly a human being cannot forecast everything when it comes to hundreds of SKUs. And maybe certain products are better suited for hands-on forecasting with a lot of assumptions, but many other, probably majority of the products are much better suited for just let the machine algorithms do the job for you, right?
Yeah, precisely. This is also what we do actually in Merck Group. When we, of course, we run some algorithms so to be able to calculate our forecast. But every month we check how the machine is kind of like progressing versus our judgmental numbers or hands-on numbers, like you said. And at the end of the day, we look into the 6 months history. And if we are super convinced that machine is better than our hands-on forecasting, our manual forecasting, then we give this one as a signal to our IBP community to say, hey guys, in this, let's say, product family, the machine is actually doing better in the last 6 months. If there is no particular reason that you really need to do it manually, just please consider to really switch it to the machine. Of course, there is the challenge, because whatever is being driven by the tool is then automatically becoming our financial commitments. So therefore, to be able to convince our stakeholders, our commercial people, our controllers that this number is true is also a big challenge.
Yeah. So it throws me back to another yet funny story from my background. My graduate degree was focused on demand planning and forecasting, and my application area was in the semiconductor industry. I worked at Intel Corporation many years ago, and I was building forecasting models, and I was trying to learn how the global forecasting, country level forecasting works. And one funny thing that I heard was, if you let all the countries forecast their own demand and you just simply sum them up, it makes double the amount of new computers that is being sold every year. And it's simply not possible. Like Intel basically at that time, maybe still is, like, own the significant majority of the market. There is simply not that many people on the planet to sell that many. If you just simply rely on country level forecasting, well, of course, every country is optimistic, or maybe there's some supply shortage situation going on. So they may slightly inflate their numbers to get a fair share of the supply quantity. And there's some gaming, and not necessarily in a bad way, but more like everybody wants to meet their numbers, right? Nobody wants to fail. So, but then there's some biases introduced with the human element of it. So how do you address that in your IBP, global IBP process?
This is also a very, very good question, because I think many of us really have received this challenge in our kind of experiences. And the basic answer to this question is, once we identify those forecasts, it also automatically becomes the financial commitment. So at the end of the day, for our commercial people, or for the people who are forecasting in the countries, in the affiliates, they know that whatever they request from the manufacturing side to produce when it is multiplied with some prices, is also becoming their financial commitment. So at the end of the day, this also is a commitment from them in terms of million euros of sales that they are going to deliver for their country. So they cannot really freely play in this area to really kind of like double their forecast to be able to get a better share in the supply, like you said, because then they are also committed to deliver this ×2 sales in their particular areas, which could be some sort of a challenge, right? So therefore, I think we play the game fair from both ends to be able to have this most reliable and realistic picture. And maybe an additional kind of factor to support this argumentation is when we publish our sales projections to our shareholders even, we need to be at a decent accuracy level. Otherwise, when we kind of like deliver these targets and sales expectations and then cannot deliver it, this might be also a big issue for the company in general. So at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation to be able to provide the most unbiased and most realistic picture.
Okay, so you're saying there's also processes in place to keep entities accountable for what they submit, because they're held accountable to those numbers in the market, in their own countries, and then you monitor the forecast errors and how much they deliver, and then basically give feedback accordingly if they're overperforming, underperforming, based on the respective product categories. So that's great. So let's switch gears to majority of the market, which is like in the maybe stage 1.5, where like everybody wants to do this. Like it's kind of like the usual change management question. Who wants change? Everybody raises the hands. Who wants to change? Nobody wants to change because it's difficult. So because of this fact, and combined with pharma and supply chain complexities, this has been an area where it was my very first experience. Everybody says they want to change, but when it comes to making change happen, it's a difficult one, right? So for those of companies or supply chain leaders who are looking to change, they're really determined to change. They're going to make the best IBP or S&OP process ever in the next, let's say, time horizon. Tell us about a typical best practice approach to making it happen, how long it takes, who to involve, how you select the right technology, the whole 9 yards, maybe in piece by piece.
All right. So the very important kind of piece of puzzle in this area is really to get the correct sponsorship from the leadership team, because like we said from in the beginning of the podcast, if it is only the supply chainers who want to go for this change, well, there is very kind of like a big likelihood that it will not really fly. Nevertheless, if the head of commercial, if head of finance, if head of those business functions really believe in that this change is going to bring some value to their businesses, then there is also a very big likelihood that those companies could really succeed. So and how can they really convince their people, their leaders, that this is a good strategy? By some facts. We need to make sure that the improvements happening with IBP is very visible to everybody. So therefore, a proper communication always needs to be in place. We cannot just simply rely on kind of one communication that was sent by our CEO that, okay, now we switch from S&OP to IBP, nice, well done. It cannot really stop at that point. There needs to be a continuous discussion, continuous evolvement of the process. Let me also try to give you one example here. The IBP process per se was introduced to Merck Healthcare approximately 7-8 years ago. And when we compare the process as of now versus how it used to be 7-8 years ago when the first deployment was done, we see some dramatic, some really major changes. And this is for the good, because the IBP process itself is evolving based on the feedback that is received from the customers, from the shareholders. So therefore, it is important to note down that change is the only constant, and the supply chainers, this IBP community, needs to take into account the feedback that they receive from their shared stakeholders to adapt the process accordingly. So we cannot really rely on one single success factor when this IBP was deployed, because it needs to be a learning curve all throughout the years.
So you're saying that don't make the perfect the enemy of the good, and start somewhere. It will always improve, but you have to start somewhere. But that somewhere starts with the leadership buy-in at all levels, not just the supply chain, but the commercial, the quality, the executive leadership. Everybody, they all want to change for the better. And no need to share specific numbers, but we all know that supply chains, when they improve, they add a lot of ROI, a lot of value. So how do companies who are going to start this process can go out to prove this value, or at least estimate the business value of doing the S&OP, doing the IBP the right way? How should they approach this?
I mean, there are a couple of elements, and I think it really depends on the company, but I can give you some examples on some product shortages. Even if none of us as in supply chain want to face it, I think we always have some issues in supply, right? I mean, it can be related to our API producer, it could be anything, and we know it. At the end of the day, once we have a better forecasting accuracy, then this automatically leads to better product allocation. If we have some limited supply globally, and then we really need to distribute those products to the markets that really need it, the accuracy really pays off. And this automatically translates into higher margins, because we are able to deliver more sales, and also we are able to send the products to the markets that really require it. So that's number one. The second one is, once all of those forecasts and the prices and the costs and everything are combined in the same platform, that makes it easier. I mean, still it is not a very easy task, but at least it is easier to come up with some decisions, because if you have the right information, the right data set on those elements, it will definitely ease up your life, the life of the planner, to come up with a better decision in terms of planning. So once those two are really addressed and also presented to our senior leadership accordingly, then we make sure that we have the buy-in, and then they also would always know and remind themselves that IBP is an important element in the process for the company, not only for supply chain. Again, I want to emphasize this point. It is really a company-wide process.
Right. Okay, great. This is great summary of, let's say, how you go about starting this change management. It's a long term, like you say, like after 7-8 years, you're still evolving, you're still improving. So like setting the right expectation is also important. Like all the hypes, like for example, nowadays everybody's hyped up about AI. Everybody wants to do it. Once upon a time, everybody was also hyped up about S&OP and IBP. But like trying to set an expectation that before the end of this year we are going to be perfect S&OP process, or IBP process, is not realistic, is what you're saying. It will be a multiple year effort. Therefore, continuity is important. Commitment in the long term is important, and setting the right goals and incentives, right, is important. In terms of maybe like a small digression onto the technology side of the S&OP and IBP, like what should companies look for in selecting the right technology partner? And is there emerging leaders, or like everybody has their own unique needs? Like how should they go about selecting the right technology, or should they start from spreadsheets first and then evolve into the technology platform later? What is your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, at least the way we envisioned it and also the way we processed it is to start with the process angle first. When we wanted to change our IBP process or our S&OP process in Merck Healthcare, we first identified the to-be process. We literally didn't spend any time, I would say, on the tool selection at that point. So what is it that we want to achieve from a process point of view? What is the to-be process? Once this one is done, once we had a couple of dry runs, and then once we really were once we agreed that this is the process that we want to have, then we took the second step to go to select the tool, the solution part. It could well be that the companies might improve their existing tools to really help their IBP processes, or it could be that they really go out, make a study on which really tool could be the best for their processes. But the most important part again is to define the process and then sit together with the technical teams to identify which one would be the most appropriate to complement the process, because the companies should not build their processes based on the tool capabilities. This, I find it very risky, honestly. Yep. They first need to align on their to-be process, then really run this process, and then decide which tool is really the best one to complement it.
So you're saying people and process first, run it for a few, let's say rounds, and then decide which technology can help you, or a collection of technologies, right? Maybe it's not one technology, like you said, maybe demand planning is different and more advanced with some technology providers, and the supply planning and inventory planning. But it's the follow-on decision, not the primary decision, which is good to know. Any fun stories that you want to share, like from your experience of like getting this change management done? We all know it's not an easy job to do the change management. There's always something funny about our experiences. Anything that you want to share?
I mean, there are always some ups and downs. What I can share is, I mean, there might be also some kind of bad days, relatively bad days, and then there might be some feelings like, yeah, I think we won't be really able to get there. And this is very usual, I would say. In every change management aspect, this happens. My only recommendation in this one, in this regard, could be to really keep pushing. If they really are convinced that the change is going to bring some benefits to the entire organization, still, I think it makes perfect sense to push for it, and then still keep on being close to their commercials, to their controllers, and to everyone on the table. So there might be some less good days or unpleasant surprises from anywhere, but the most important part is really to keep the head high and then to keep on striving. This would be my kind of like friendly remark to everybody.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Like from my experience, like, working with one of the forecasters, I was trying to build some advanced forecasting models for the department. And then this one particular forecaster claimed that he has 99% forecast accuracy. And of course, it's hard to believe, right? When you hear, like if you hear 80% forecast accuracy, you would just like, be like suspicious about what's going on. And in this funny story, I said, okay, let's hear it. Let's see the spreadsheet. I want to take a look at your numbers, how you're getting at 99%. And it turns out that he was adding up all the months of cumulative forecast he did perform over 18 months or longer. And then he summed up all the sales, actual sales over the same horizon. And cumulatively, they were within 1% of each other, which sounded excellent forecasting performance. But if you look into the individual months of forecast, especially for the lead time that it really matters, like when the supply plan needs to be something like 3 months out, 6 months out, the forecast accuracy was all over the place. It was like horrible. But then this person was feeling good about the 99%. So it gives another example of, look, you can make the numbers look any way you like, depending on which analysis you run. But here, the whole idea is to run an unbiased process, which is good for the company, not to make individuals look good or bad, because it's a teamwork, right? Manufacturing may look bad on that month, but then the sales looks great, right? It's the overall company that matters. Sometimes I think this, let's say, the cultural aspect of the change, where people don't want to be the one that is failing, is also an obstacle in front of the change, right? Like, hey, everybody wants to look good, therefore they find ways to report metrics, they make them look good, but then overall company is not good at all. So how come with 99% forecast accuracy, your overall financials are not even half there, right?
Right.
So excellent. Any key messages as we wrap up this nice, very engaging discussion? Any, let's say, messages for professionals who are early in their career? They're maybe finding themselves in the middle of supply chain trade-offs and S&OPs and IBP implementations. Like, what would you tell them from your experience?
Yeah, I think we said a lot, but if I really want to wrap it up in maybe 3 bullet points, I would first tend to go with agility is key. Our supply chain environment is changing day by day. Therefore, we cannot really stick to a process which we developed 10 years ago. I mean, this has to change, and we need to understand that the changes are our usual part of the thing, and then we need to adapt ourselves accordingly. My second maybe point could be that we need to find some good allies outside of supply chain. If we want to really be successful, if we want to have the best process, the best setup, we need to make sure that we have some allies in our commercial area, in controlling area, and whatsoever. And the third one is we need to write down, we need to document our processes really properly, because the knowledge is very important for every company. And then once we really have a good documentation in terms of like how our processes run, then this already gives a good continuation of everything. So please make sure changes are going to happen also tomorrow. Find your best friends and then make a proper documentation.
Excellent. This was a great sum up of all the key points. I think this topic particularly will continue to be a hot topic for the next, not just 5, 10 years, maybe a couple of decades, until maybe such time where one of my many years ago articles, envisioned like self-driving supply chain. I think we are already in the middle of that change. Like more of our workload is being handled by machines, by algorithms, by AI. In some cases, maybe like in the self-driving cars market, the cars are about to get real for self-driving capabilities. I think supply chain, especially the main business process of the supply chain and commercial, is the IBP. We can maybe get to a point where IBP is more like a self-driving, at least 80-90%, with small tweaks and support from the leaders for decision making. Well, let's see if it happens or not. We can look back into this podcast and see, yep, we have said that it's going to be an issue or not. We'll find out. But Tolga, thank you very much for your great contributions and an open discussion today.
Thank you very much for having me today. Have a great day.
Excellent.